I guess I would challenge everybody who's listening to say, what can you do to make a difference, and why would you not? What is your argument for not doing that? I'm hopeful that more people will examine this, particularly now, because it's become, again, for no good reason, in my view, it's become politically controversial. And I think that's really unfortunate. And I think that it just puts the onus back on every single leader in our industry to examine their thinking and come up with what you think matters and then act on it.
Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we dive into the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of water. I'm your host, Isaac Pellerin, and alongside my co-host, Megan Glover, the founder of 120 Water, we bring you insights from hundreds of incredible conversations we've had over the past 9 years with inspiring and energizing leaders in the water industry. Each week, we share those stories and conversations with entrepreneurs, community champions, and innovators who are making water work for everyone. Whether you're a water professional, a curious innovator, or simply passionate about our most precious resource, this podcast is for you. Let's get started.
Well, we have got a great show and a wonderful guest today. Debra Coy is joining the show, who just original bow wow investing in water since before there was a sector. And I just think she's going to have some incredible outlook and advice to share, not only on her industry experience, but also what does it mean to be a female leader and a woman leader in water?
Yeah, she's great. And do you remember how you first were introduced to Debra?
Yeah, it would have been through the Imagine H2O network, and which I think we talked about that network at the pod before, but it's worth just, if you don't know what it is, go check it out. Yeah. It's a phenomenal organization for startup companies looking to commercialize their product, get connected into the VC community, get connected with mentors and other leaders in water. And I mean, it's just, every entrepreneur needs to try to get a part of that cohort.
Yeah, it is. And she's got such a rich background with her time at XPV as well, that really helped shape, how do you start attracting innovation into this industry? And so it's a really good conversation that we have the pleasure of bringing you. And so let's go ahead and listen in. Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we celebrate the people that are innovating and serving water utilities and the water industry as a whole. So, Megan, we have got an incredible guest today.
Yes,
Who do we have?
Well, I am very excited to welcome our guest today, Debra Coy, board member, investor, former XPV, and OG Bow Wow. Badass woman of water, so we like to say. And Debra and I met very early on in kind of our 120 Water journey, and I've always appreciated her mentorship and her brilliance kind of navigating the water landscape, entrepreneurship, and champion women leaders in the water industry. So, Debra, it is wonderful to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So, we always like to kick off with the same question, because we find it very interesting to hear all of the different stories about how water found you. So, Debra, would you mind telling your story about how water found you?
It is it's a good question, and I will say that that's how it works. It does seem like water finds us. I talked to some people that went looking for water, but mostly, particularly for anybody who started as long ago as I did, when nobody ever heard of water as an actual career. Water definitely found me when I was working for a Washington investment research group, and I was focused on hazardous waste and solid waste, and the Clean Air Act had passed not too long ago, so that goes to show how long ago it was. And my then British owner company, a big bank in the UK, had just gotten involved in the UK water industry because Margaret Thatcher had privatized the UK water industry, again, showing how long ago this was, that one of the one of my company managers called up and said, "Can you figure out the U.S. water industry, because our companies want to expand into the U.S. and they don't know what to buy, and so can you go figure it out?" And I'm like, "Okay." And that was the beginning, it was a very fragmented utility industry, mostly in the hands of the public sector, as we know, but that was the beginning of me learning about the water industry. Very long time ago, never left since then.
It has a way of doing that to you,
Yeah.
doesn't it?
It does have a way of doing that. I warn, when I talk to younger students or new entrepreneurs, I'm like, be careful. You get in water, you're never going to get out.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in going back, I mean, you were really investing and mapping the market before there really was a sector, right? So can you speak to how you've seen the sector evolve across your career?
Yeah, it really has. I mean, that's the biggest change. I've said this to others. When I did first start studying and following the water sector, I had a lot of colleagues who said, "What are you doing? This is not a real industry. What do you think you can invest in?" And that has really been the fundamental change. Is I think we're not where we need to be as a sector in terms of visibility and focus from the investment community. We still have a long ways to go, but it has changed so much in the last, it's really been more like 30 plus years since I started looking at it, that finally people realize that, number one, the sector needs investment, and number two, that doesn't all and shouldn't all, perhaps more importantly, all come from the public sector. There's this fundamental view for so long that water's a public good, and it is, but that therefore that meant that the only entities that should be investing in water should be the public sector, that is government funding. And what's really changed over the course of my career has been the realization that there's a huge role for the private sector to play in the water business, not only in providing services, but also in terms of bringing efficient capital formation into the sector. So it's been interesting to watch.
Yeah. What do you think are one of some of the maybe couple of main drivers of that kind of started raising the profile over the past 20 years or so?
I think it was partly, initially, as I said at the beginning, it was that privatization of the water utility industry in the UK, and that never really grew globally. But those companies started putting money in, so there became more attention to the still relatively small, but American Water Works was a tiny little company when I first started following it, and now it's the largest regulated utility in the U.S. and attracted a lot of investor interest. And then we also started to see some companies looking at the technology and services side. The predecessor of Xylem, for instance, which is now one of the largest publicly traded companies on the technology and services side, started out as a few small little pump and treatment companies, and then gradually was put together. A guy by the name of Dick Heckman, who was a very kind of promotional entrepreneur, put together a company called US Filter, which then became Evoqua, which is now part of Xylem. And so these pieces of the water industry started coming to the attention of investors, and I think it just woke up. It woke up institutional, larger investors. It woke up some retail investors. It woke up some people in private equity, some people in venture capital. Honestly, all those groups in the investment community are still learning what's possible, but those are some of the pieces I think that started getting people to pay attention to the fact that this actually was a potentially investable industry as opposed to just a government service.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've had just a fantastic view of pattern recognition, right? To see what's worked and what's not worked, quite frankly, with some of these investable or not businesses. Can you point to any success factors or characteristics of what has worked well and maybe what hasn't?
Yeah, that's a pretty fundamental question, and it's so critical. And I'm still shocked at how many people don't think about it that way. And when you think about obviously private capital, it needs to have a return.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty basic, but a lot of people forget that in the water industry because of that public good perception. And I think the key success factor is understanding what the real levers are, in terms of building a business, whether you're building a regulated utility that has to meet regulatory requirements or whether you're building, Megan, as you did, a smaller services company that's working with utilities and other stakeholders. You have to understand the very fundamental basics of supply and demand that will allow you to put in place a pricing model that will actually work. So I feel like the success factors for people that make it work in the industry are understanding where the real demand is. What do we need to fix? We need to fix infrastructure, we need to fix water safety, we need to fix supply issues. What is it we need to, we need to fix the fact that people are perhaps drinking unsafe water that's contaminated with lead.
Yeah.
Again, one of the things that you looked at. And once we understand that problem, we need to understand what the economics are of solving the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
And that means you have to have a pricing model that will allow you to be successful as a company. And there isn't any reason why there can't be some sort of subsidies involved. I mean, that's how the clean energy industry worked at the beginning. There was a lot of subsidies for solar and wind and other things, and now those sources of energy are becoming independent of subsidies, and they're working from a pure economic standpoint. And that's how water has to think as well. And it's just shocking to me how often people don't realize the fundamental underlying economics that are critical for making this sector work. And frankly, they're critical for making it work, whether it's publicly funded or privately funded, because there has to be a way that we solve the problem, but be able to still attract the sources of funding to do it. And I've been hearing for my entire career, oh, we're not spending enough money. We don't have enough money. We can't possibly fix it because we don't have enough money to put into water. It needs trillions and trillions. The truth is that it needs to be run more efficiently.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that basic business factor is one that isn't often recognized. Even now, it's still being recognized in the water sector.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a big journey. And I feel like that's we do focus a lot on what it means to run a sustainable water utility, but how do we translate that also into running sustainable businesses around the water operation?
Mm-hmm.
You're so right, Isaac. I mean, sustainable is the word. I know that sustainability has become sort of tied in with, all this ESG drama, that has gone on unnecessarily in my view. But sustainable just means that it can operate for a long period of time.
Exactly.
That's the basic meaning of sustainable.
Yeah.
And so whether it's, sustainable for the environment or sustainable for the, for the community, sustainable for the business, it's all the same. it's like what can actually work over a long period of time, as opposed to this tendency to let's swoop in and try to do this quick fix.
Oh, yes.
But then it falls apart because it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
It's a core concept that we could use more work on in our industry.
Yeah. Quick fix or over engineering the solution. I feel like having been paired with academia in some early projects that we ran, I mean, I think there's also that pull to say, okay, I mean, this might be a little over engineered, and we certainly don't. We need to, kind of spread and scale these programs so that we can offer more of the outcome, right? So just, sometimes we tend to over engineer, I think.
We're
what's
really
actually
good
needed.
at over engineering in the water industry. And, that's what happens when you've perceived that money is free and that it's all about, and it is about safety, but over engineering is a perfect example of a business model that's not sustainable.
Yeah.
I think about the conversation that was happening when I was new to the water industry in like 2019. We were at Imagine H2O, and a lot of it was like, well, how do we attract more innovators from outside of the industry to invest in water? And I think I'd love to hear your thoughts too on like what helps create the ecosystem for innovations and things that can come into the sector and get adopted by the sector, to have more openness to adopting innovation.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, and I'd be curious to hear more of your perceptions when you first started looking at it too, because a lot of people come from outside the sector and they go, "Oh my gosh, this is even worse than I thought." And in terms of the stasis and the we've always done it this way kind of thinking, I really do believe that's changing, and it's just, in our case in water, a lot of it's just generational. The next generation of people who understand everything from social media to, basic computer technology to all forms of AI applications are just making change that, my generation was unable to think about. So I really think what's changing is that, I mean, there have been, there's starting to be these, Imagine H2O's done a lot of great work around this, and some of the other, smaller, younger companies, and some of that have grown bigger or been acquired. It starts to create a bit of a excitement. Oh, well, then maybe, we can do something in water. Maybe there is something exciting to do. And I think that then feeds on itself. Again, we have more work to do on that front, but it does feel to me like there's a sense of possibility and excitement and interest from some entrepreneurs and people from outside the sector that are going, wow, this is huge. The need is huge, and it's kind of a little bit new territory. It hasn't been, overdone, overinvested. There's a lot of room for new ideas. And, you guys are sitting more at the forefront of this probably than I am, but I see it through, I do some work with Fern Island, and as Megan mentioned, have been involved with XPV for a long time. There's just a lot more interest than there used to be.
Yeah.
So I find that encouraging.
Yes.
And I think it's all about believing that there's something to do, right? Not that it's a hopeless cause and you're going to toil away for 10 years and never be able to break through, and, your market is too static. I think that the viewpoint is starting to change in terms of that there is possibility, and that's what's gonna drive people to the sector. Like, wow, there's something we can do here.
Yeah, and I guess my last question for you on entrepreneurship and venture. We have seen, as you mentioned, some non-water funds, both in VC, PE, and growth equity, kind of come into the sector. What advice do you have for those fund managers that are looking at water as a sector, and have a thesis, but to your point, you have to marry the economics of the business with the thesis, right? So, any thoughts on that matter?
Yeah, I do think about that, and I feel the number of those calls from different investors going, "Oh, we're looking at something in water infrastructure. Oh, we're looking at something in water technology. Oh, we're looking at a roll-up." Um, my advice is to the investor, water's a big industry. It covers a wide range of technologies and services and business models, and it does have a regulatory overlay and a public health overlay that not all industries have. Maybe the healthcare industry, which is huge, would be the closest comparison. And so my advice is understand what you're investing in. Learn the segment that you're looking at, learn how it works, learn how those pieces fit together. The regulatory, the consumer, the the business people, and then realize what's possible and how to, as I said at the beginning, how to pull the right levers to get the growth and to get the economics at the bottom line that you're ultimately going to require. I feel like that work, that research work doesn't always get done at the level that it probably should. People go, "Oh, water's big. I'll invest in water." I'm like, yeah, water's really big.
Yeah.
Figure out, how you fit into that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's vast, it's diverse, it's global, but to your point, understanding what niche, because every good water company has focus, right? That's why the ones are successful, right? You know your market, you know what value, props you bring your market, and how you can generate money at the end
Know
of the day.
your customer.
Know
Yep.
your customer. Yeah. Yeah. So safe to assume, investors should do their homework too, right?
Yeah. Yeah, they should. I mean, they some do more than others. I mean, that's been one of the benefits, and the XPV, for example. When those guys started in water, one of them had a water background, but the other partners came from the tech industry, and they had no idea, and it was constantly surprising to them. But after a little while, they become specialists in water. So I think it requires that kind of commitment. And it's worthwhile to do it.
Yeah. I think that almost could take our conversation into a little bit of a left turn, thinking about how the folks come from technology. Only one came from water in XPV's case, but now we have data centers popping up here in Indiana. There was just a big both a protest and there's a lot of controversy around, hey, should a data center for a large tech company come in because of the amount of water that's going to take and those kind of things. I'm curious, there's a couple ways we can think about that. That's either a threat or it's an opportunity to lean in and engage.
I lean toward the opportunity side.
Yeah.
Because there's always a threat to water supplies. Data centers are obviously a topical example, but data centers are clearly here to stay because we don't think AI is going away. And maybe, AI will get more efficient and it won't require as much computing capacity, but we got a ways to go on that. And in the meantime, what does that mean for water? And then it just becomes another, it's no different than, all the arguments about putting in a new fab plant. There used to be a lot of discussion about how much water those things took. But now the fab plants are mostly running on recycled water and they're not even using that much new water. And the same thing will happen with data centers. It's going to be a matter of how you run those systems the most efficiently as possible, how you recycle the cooling water and fit it into the overall community. So I'd hate to see the water industry object to data centers on the theory that they're using up precious scarce water supplies, because that's been true of every industry that has ever been invented. So I feel like it's just another example of how the water industry has to stay in tune with where the world is going and look at it as an opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm loving all of these case studies. And Isaac, we were in DC talking about this just last week of leveraging these big companies to offset major costs to the utility, right? We heard of, funding various asset management, programs or, meter, meter upgrades or something like that. But how do we leverage this as a driver to, build more sustainable businesses?
Yeah, it takes some level of leaning in and inviting the collaboration of the conversation.
Yeah.
And rather than straight up offering resistance, saying, well, here are some of the needs we have in our community.
Yeah. What can you do for me?
What can you do for me? And negotiating better.
It's a really good and interesting point for the sector, that I think that the utility industry, and this has been probably true of the regulated utilities that I used to follow, and also true of a lot of municipal water and wastewater utilities that I've worked with. They tend to operate in their own little silo, and they're focused on the mechanics of the delivery of the service. How do we get the water in? How do we treat it? How do we deliver it? And not so much on the broader ecosystem, as you said. It's starting to change in some places where, the wastewater utility is now calling themselves Clean Water Services, and they're thinking about, all the things that they can do to recycle water or use it for other purposes. But that whole community collaboration in terms of both the supply and the reuse side, and how that fits with economic development for the community, is still something that needs work. And I think the utility industry can do more on that front too, but it's also just educating, the mayor and the city council. This is not just this little side thing that, provides water, but this is this integral part of developing your economy. And instead of worrying about, where do we get the funding to do it, to just like fix the falling apart pipes, how can we integrate this into a broader economic development plan for the community? I don't frankly understand why the industry hasn't done a better job of that, other than the fact, and Isaac, I presume he knows this better than most people, there's not a lot of strong marketing people in the water sector. It's never been viewed as a sexy place for for marketing, branding, people to come and work. And as that is beginning to change, you're an example of somebody who came in from the outside to help us tell the story. And as that starts to change, I'm hopeful that this collaboration will grow. But it's been something that's held the water industry back. The fact that it has stayed way too siloed and not sufficiently integrated with the overall community.
Now, we couldn't agree more. And it's just amazing to me. We've had a lot of diverse folks on the podcast, but this is just a recurring theme. No matter what approach you have or, vantage point you have in water, like it is just, we are terrible at telling our own story. And that's just something that's got to get better in our industry, I think, as we think about creating sustainable utilities.
Yeah.
So Debra, we mentioned in the intro, successful investor, mentor, and advocate and women in leadership, and I really loved your what you said on the fundamental molecule with Tom Ferguson. It's a great podcast. If you've not had a chance to tune in there, definitely take a listen to the fundamental molecule. But you mentioned something about the importance of having a diverse leadership team and an impact on the bottom line. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about your thesis and why that's so important based on what you've seen in your career?
I feel like it is really, really fundamental, and and it honestly ties most closely to what we just said, which is that we need to have a more collaborative community approach to the sector. And when there's this tendency in water to have a small group of, let's be real, particularly on the technology and services side and investor side, historically, it's just frankly a lot of white guys and their friends from school and their friends from Wall Street and their friends. And this is, we all know this. When you're with a group of your friends who have pretty much the same background as you, you're going to have groupthink and you're going to kind of approach things the way you always have. So I think it's just self-evident that other voices bring other views and helps to create the innovation and just new ways of thinking that this sector really, really needs. And so it's a range of people that come from. My view of diversity in the water sector is certainly that we need more women in leadership positions, because this is half the population and a lot of your customers.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's also that we need more, particularly when you're working in some communities, more people with diverse ethnic backgrounds, more people with diverse socioeconomic backgrounds, and also, as we just said, more people with different educational backgrounds, people that come from a different place and have different points of view that can spark new ways of thinking. I just think it is so important for the water industry. And it's something that on all of those different measures of diversity, we haven't done a great job. Private equity, where I came from, is one of the worst. You pull up the, I might have already said this to Tom, but it's still one of the things that horrifies me. You pull up the page of, here's our people for most, and this is not, because there's very little in water private equity. I'm just talking about more
In
broadly
general,
from an
absolutely.
investor class, that it's, it's a lot of people that look the same in all those boxes. And that is starting to change. I think it has to change more, because we also talk about workforce in this industry and the need to attract a younger workforce into the water sector, because so many people are retiring, and because of what we had said, in the utility industry, it's kind of viewed as sleepy and you're not attracting that many people. And I feel that to attract a strong, vibrant, successful workforce into the industry, we need to have a welcoming environment so you don't feel like you're the only one. Megan and I, I'm sure, can speak to how many times we've been the only woman in the room in some sort of a water sector gathering. And the same thing for people of color, or somebody who didn't grow up as a water engineer. Whatever the different ways of being, how can we create a welcoming environment so people want to come in and then are supported when they're there, so that you can then thrive. I just feel so strongly that if we can create those kinds of environments across the sector, in the services side and the utility side, that it really can make a difference for the future of the industry. I really feel we are missing an opportunity by this tendency to keep bringing in the people that look the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm curious, Isaac, you are an influencer in the industry, dad of two beautiful daughters. What's your point of view on the subject in terms of how do we create that welcoming environment where we can, attract diversity and support diversity?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I often feel like I'm really proud that I get to work with a lot of smart, strong women, and that my daughters get to see that's a lot of folks that I collaborate with on our leadership team have been women, and so then there's just making sure that I think it's incumbent on folks of my
Yeah.
of my
Stature.
persuasion as well, just to be more aware. I mean, you talk about being in rooms. We've been in plenty of rooms where I could feel the assumptions of, if Megan and I are both in the room,
I was
who
the, I think I was the assistant. I was the assistant.
the assumed posture of just needing to be like, well, like person who started the company is right here. Strategy comes from over here. So I think there needs to be more awareness. And we had this great conversation with Chelsea Boozer as well on the podcast, just about ensuring that the environments we create are inclusive, because if we don't do that, that does limit our ability to attract the workforce, which we also need. And so it's not just what needs to happen, it also is part of the economic driver of making water work.
Yeah. Yeah, and it also makes me think about the role of like allyship, and maybe Bow Wow's next sticker should be "I'm an ally," right? Because I think getting more people to declare they're willing to be an ally, right, for a person or a cause, and just understanding like who, group think that way. Let's group think and be allies, right? And try to create a safe space for not only women in the industry, but women who want to get in the industry or try to excel in the industry. Support them, right?
Yeah.
No,
exactly.
I do. I really agree that this can't be just women advocating for women, although we do that too. But I really do feel it's incredibly important to have men who are allies, and as you said so well, Isaac, to be aware. I mean, I think there does still tend to be a lot of lack of awareness of, because this is always the way it was, and it's kind of, the example that you gave where you're assumed to be the senior person because you're the man, that people then, make a joke and laugh a little bit, but it's not necessarily always an educational opportunity. And I think that we as women become conditioned to feel like we need to not say too much because we'll be viewed as shrill and complaining, and, just the way that it comes off, that you feel like you have to just sort of hunker down and work behind the scenes to, exert your rights, as well as just to be successful and, figure out the ways to be successful in an environment. And it will be so helpful to have more men who are, have really been through the thought process, or, maybe we need more formal bias training in workplaces, that, it's not something where people just roll their eyes and go, oh, this is stupid, but like, oh, this is what matters. And this is how we can, speak up when someone who has a quieter voice is being talked over in a meeting, or the assumption has been made just to who should go get the coffee, or,
Who's going to order the lunch?
Yeah. Yeah. Who's going to take the notes in the meeting? Yeah. We finally have AI to do that.
And then the bigger things too, who's prepared for a promotion, and who's prepared to take a leadership role, and who's prepared to run the department, and who's prepared to be elevated to CEO. And, what are all the pieces that allow that to happen, including, the uncomfortable truth that women are still mothers. And so to move women up through leadership roles in the water industry is going to require more accommodation for family. And, the water industry is still old fashioned that way, where, that's like, well, sorry, you're going to have to take some time off for maternity leave. So I guess somebody else is going to have to move up. You know, thinking through all of those things is going to require allies in leadership positions to put the policies in place that that make it work so that it will benefit the organization, not so that you're just doing somebody a favor, but so that it will benefit the organization.
Yeah. And to your point, like making sure that when a seat opens on the leadership team in the boardroom, is the knee-jerk reaction to get our buddy in that seat, or to say this is an opportunity to ensure that we're promoting, that we're creating well-rounded perspectives and sharpening our vision.
Exactly.
And that's really important.
Well, and Deborah, I think as you pointed out, maybe the less vocal, again, women are the worst at advocating for themselves sometimes, right? And so, oftentimes that seat may not be obvious, and being more deliberate in how we pick that seat. And I love what you said, Deborah, about the diversity of thought, because I think it's just so critical to the success of business. Well, as you know, I'm very personally passionate about this as well. And so I could riff on this until we're blue in the face, but I think we're going to take some action on this moving forward, because I think it's just really important that, if we're in this industry, we need to support this industry and the diversity and growth. So we're here for it. So Deborah, any parting thoughts? If you could, wave your wand, next 5 years, outlook of this industry, what do you hope to see?
I do hope to see this finally come true, that I've been wanting for my whole career, is to have more actual diversity, and not just some talk, to where we actually make it happen. And I think we could do it in 5 years, where we could make a difference if enough people put their minds to it. And I guess I would challenge everybody who's listening to say, what can you do that will make a difference, and not fall back on, well, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to start. Nobody, I didn't get enough diverse candidates for the opening. What can you do to make a difference? And why would you not? What is your argument for not doing that? Why do you think it's okay to not? I'm hopeful that more people will examine this, particularly now, because it's become, again, for no good reason, in my view, it's become politically controversial. And I think that's really unfortunate. And I think that it just puts the onus back on every single leader in our industry to examine their thinking and come up with what you think matters, and then act on it.
Mic drop.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's do it.
I love that call to action.
Yeah.
I love that call to action. Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for your continued support, mentorship. It means the world, and I'm just so glad you were able to share that with others on the podcast today.
Great to talk to you guys. Thank you so much.
Well, obviously, so lucky that we were able to share that conversation with Deborah today. Just an enormous amount of institutional knowledge, both investing in the sector, finding trends of what's worked, what's not. But Isaac, personally for me, bonding with Deborah on her thesis of building diverse leadership teams, and how can we as a sector really be more proactive in making that happen. So I think for me, I think having this conversation as part of the call to action that I'm going to take, right?
Yeah.
Just announcing, I'm here as a mentor. I want to see more women in the boardroom and around the table. And so I think Deborah said, hey, call to action, take one action step. So if anybody's listening to this saying, hey, I need a mentor or whatnot, feel free to reach out to me. How about you? What'd you take away?
That same thing. I mean, she's just been so such a leader, a first leader in this sector, as you said, kind of before it became a sector, helping to shape it, but also not letting go of the way that she wants it to continue to evolve and change, and to invite all of us along that journey. And so I just love that we get to do this, that we get to have conversations with incredible leaders like Debra. And we're so thankful that you joined us. And if you enjoyed this episode, please like and share and follow and do all the things that you do with a podcast. And let us know who else you want to hear from in this sector, the people who make water work. We just couldn't do this alone. And so we can't wait to see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Make Water Work podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message. Together, we can make water work for everyone.